So now quickly, what is entity framework? I can see that it's 9 o'clock. Let us start. Okay. I can see that a lot of people already know about entity framework, and just 2 minutes, everyone. I think I need to talk to my support team. They're really, it's I am taking control. Yeah. So, okay, send a message to them. Fine. So guys, can anyone tell me what exactly is entity framework? Can anyone tell me in 3 letters what is entity framework? It's an ORM. Very nice, Nitesh. So that's right. It's an ORM. Okay, so here it is, guys. I would like to give a bigger picture of this ORM, object relational model. So I would like to give a bigger picture of it. So let me just open MS Paint out here. If you look at the recent design patterns, what we have, right? If you look at the current design patterns, a lot of these design patterns are architecture patterns. I will say, rather, I will not say design patterns, architecture patterns. Remember, there is a difference between design patterns and architecture pattern. There is design pattern, there is architecture pattern, there is architecture style. Just let me just explain these 3 things, and then we can talk. So there is architecture pattern, right? There is design pattern. I can put design pattern at the top. There is design pattern, and then there is architecture style. Architecture style. All of these 3 things, 3 words, whenever you are using as a senior person, you need to be very careful. So in design pattern, like for example, examples of design pattern are factory pattern, singleton pattern. In case you have not seen my design pattern tutorial, do have a look. In design pattern, we know the source code, we know the pseudo source code, we know the pseudo code, we know the pseudo code, we know something that, okay, like for example, if you are saying singleton pattern, then singleton pattern will have a static, will have the constructor private. If you say iterator pattern, then you will say, okay, there should be I enumerable, that should be I enumerator. So when you say design pattern, if somebody said that this is a design pattern, factory is a design pattern, then there should be some base source code. It is same true for C#, it is same true for TypeScript, it is same true for Java. Okay. Architecture pattern, in architecture pattern, you basically just know the block diagrams. So you know that there are 3 blocks like model, view, controller. That's it. Okay, I'll tell you guys why I'm explaining these 3 things, because when you say ORM, then what exactly it means. Okay, so model, view, controller, model, view, model. So we only know that yes, there are 4 blocks, model, 3 blocks, model, view, and view model. Model, view, and controller. Now, what is inside that blocks? How a model view controller will be implemented by ASP.NET, or how a model view controller will be implemented by someone else, it is different, right? But we just know what are those blocks and what are they meant for, but how it is implemented, it depends on the technology you are using. It depends. If you are using struts, it's in a different way. If you are using ASP.NET MVC, must be it's a different way, right? Now, architecture style. In architecture style, what happens is, it is just a principle. So like REST is architecture style which follows HTTP, okay, or must be service oriented is architecture style where XML messages are used for communication. So when you say that something is an architecture style, it is just one liner. Okay, so coming back, why I talked about these 3 things is, if you look at the recent architecture patterns, the architecture patterns which have evolved or which have become more they are more emphasized, like from the era of 2005 onwards, you will see most of the architecture pattern are on code behind, on binding code. In other words, if you see, normally whenever we visualize our software application, we have a view, we have a model, right? The model will connect to the data access layer, and that goes and saves into your RDBMS, right? I'm just putting the 4 things ahead. Must be I can just make the size bigger. You can just, so we have the view. Okay, let me make the size bigger. We have the model. So sorry for the We have the data access layer. I'm using the word data access layer. Nowadays, people are using the word context. So I'll tell you that why a lot of people use that word EF context, so data access layer, and then we have RDBMS. So like these are the basic layers. If you see between the view and model, there is a lot of code behind. So people talk about a view model in between. They talk about controllers. They talk about presenters. Some people say MVC, MVP, MVW, and whatnot, right? Code behind, whatever, right? So this UI area is one era. It's one section, where you will see a lot of people talking about MVC, MVP, MVVM. So we have all this Angular, React, your WPF, MVVM, even your MVC, right? All of these guys are talking about the gel code, the binding code between the view and the model. But now there is a other layer where the model is mapped to the database. In other words, you have a data access layer, which can be in ADO.NET, right? So this model has to be mapped to the data access layer. And again, here also we have some code behind, or I can say there is some mapping code here also, right? We write some mapping code saying this record set dot fields dot zero gets mapped to obj dot customer code, so to and fro, right? So here also again, in this area also we have code behind, which is there, right? This area of code behind is again, this is where the ORM comes into picture, object relational mapping. I wish that the architecture community would have made this more generalized and more streamlined, because now on the front end side I'm saying MVVM, MVP, and then suddenly on the back end side, I have some different vocabulary like ORM. Must be they could have also used the same kind of vocabulary here, right? But fine. The code behind, the mapping code behind between the data, the RDBMS, or I'll say the data set or the data access technology and the model, is where this object relational mapping comes into picture. So in other words, here this M stands for that object, and this data access layer, which actually connects to your relational database, is what they say R, and the mapping between them is the code, right? So what is this ORM? This ORM, you can think about it is, if you ask me, it is an architecture style, but I will also say that it is a thought process. So again, because thought process means, remember I said architecture style. So it's an architecture style where we want to use some kind of a framework that can be either entity framework, it can be either Hibernate, it can be Dapper, whatever, right? That framework will help us to do this mapping automatically. We don't have to write those code, right? So you can think about that ORM is a thought process, wherein we say that here is my model, here is my RDBMS, right? And please, make my mapping code more easy, right? So that's what this ORM is. An entity framework is a ORM, right? So that is the base goal of entity framework, right? So any questions, at least what is entity framework? So remember, the bigger picture here is all the architectures which are evolving at this moment are mostly concentrating on the gel code, the code which binds one entity to other entities. So it can be binding to view to model or model to the RDBMS. So on the front end side, it is all that MVP, MVC, MVVM, whatever you want to name it. On the back end side, on the data access side, we have this ORM, which says that I will handle the code behind the mapping code of the data access layer and the model, right? So any questions, guys, at least on the conceptual part? This is very important. Yeah, any queries here in this? What exactly is ORM? So it's an thought process, it's an architecture style, wherein we say that some framework or some automation process, right, can automate our mapping code between the object and the data access layer. Okay, right. Any questions, sir? Any queries? Right, so I can see that there are no questions. If you have any questions, you can still start putting them. Also, like, let's look at. So what I'll do is, let me open up my Visual Studio out here. So let's see that how this automation actually done, right? So what I will do is, let us today concentrate only on entity framework. Let us not try to create an MVC application or some other application, because then we will lose the focus of entity framework training, right? So what I will do is, I'll just create a .NET Core application, right? So again, one question before I start here. How many of you people are aware of .NET Core, .NET Framework, .NET Standard? You can see here, there is .NET Framework, there is .NET Core, there is .NET Standard. So I just want to know that if you are aware of all these three things, .NET Core, .NET Framework, .NET Standard, please type yes. If not, then I will go ahead with the explanation. So I can see one S. Yes. So good. Like I can see the audience is very well educated. It started learning .NET Core, right? So I can see a lot of, if a lot of people say yes, then okay. So looks like a lot of people. Okay, Hema, you are aware of .NET Standard only, or you do not know .NET Standard only? Okay. So let me quickly, guys, because I can see like a lot of people are .NET Core don't know .NET Standard. Or if you don't know .NET Core, how can you know .NET Standard? And that's because .NET Standard can only be understood if you know .NET Core, right? But very quickly, I'll just tell you guys what it is in short. So this this .NET framework is our old .NET framework, which runs only on Windows platform, right? So this .NET framework is the .NET framework which has started from our old .NET 1.1, 2.0, 3.5, 4.5, 4.6. So that family of .NET framework. So if you go and build any application with this .NET framework, it only runs on Windows platform. And this one is .NET Core, on which Microsoft is working for past 3 years, which runs cross-platform. So basically, if you start coding in this, you can run on Linux. You can see here. I don't know if I can zoom. You can see here Windows, Linux, Mac OS, right? Now, there is also something called as .NET Standard here. Now, what exactly it is? Now, if you see, we have a lot of families of .NET. So we have .NET Framework, we have .NET Core, we have Xamarin. Xamarin also is a flavor of that Mono. So we can say Mono framework. We have Silverlight framework. So if you look at, there are a lot of .NET framework families. Now let us say you want to write some reusable library, which should be used in all of these frameworks. So now you want to ensure that my library will work on, let's say, .NET Framework, .NET Core, and so on, right? So this .NET Standard says that if you're in .NET Standard 2.0, you will work on this, and this framework, right? So basically, if you look at this, if you see .NET Standard, so this .NET Standard is just a standard which says, I can just open up, where is the Microsoft site? So the .NET Standard is like a huge table, you can say, where .NET Standard table, I can say, .NET Standard table. Yeah. So if you see here, you can see this big list out here, which says that, like, for example, you can see, if I say I am on .NET Standard, let us say 2.0, right? You can see this .NET Standard 2.0. That means I can work on .NET Core. My code can work on .NET Core. My code can work on .NET Framework. My code can work on Mono, right? So, so this is the table here which says that if you are on certain standard, you will work on certain frameworks, right? So that is what is .NET Standard. And your .NET framework is your old framework, which you normally use. And .NET Core is cross-platform, right? So now, because we are doing entity framework, let us use this console app. So console EF Core. Okay, let's use this. Right? So again, I repeat, .NET Core runs cross-platform. .NET Framework runs only on Windows. And .NET Standard is used so that, your class libraries, can be reusable across many frameworks. So if you say you are following .NET Standard 2.0, that means you work on this core also, you work on, must be Silverlight or .NET Framework also, must be you work on your .NET Framework 4.6, so they have the table mapping over there, okay? So here is my .NET Core application, right? So first thing, for Entity Framework, right, we need to go ahead and get Entity Framework. Now in Entity Framework Core, they have divided into two sections. So they have said that one is the Entity Framework Core, and another one is the driver. So for example, I will say, okay, entity framework core, and then I will say SQL Server entity framework drivers, or Oracle entity framework core drivers. So basically, whenever you do a nugget, at least till this time, um, you have to do two things. One is you have to install entity framework core, and you have to install the respective core libraries of the respective RDBMS, right? So I will go here and I will say manage NuGet packages. And here, the first thing is you will need entity framework core. So entity framework core. So you can see here, this is Microsoft entity framework core. So this is one which you need, right? At this moment, whatever demos I'm showing, it is in 2.x, it is 2.2 exactly to say. So this is 2.2 out here. So I'll say install, right? And also you can see there is one more package here in Microsoft entity framework.SQL server. So again, this is core one which we need to install. So remember, both of them are core, huh? So this one is Microsoft entity framework core, right, which is the base libraries, and then we have Microsoft entity framework core.SQL server, which is for entity framework for SQL server, right? So I'm going to go and install both of them. So I'll say this is I accept, and the second one is SQL server install. I accept, right? Okay, right, so there it is. I will come to all the questions, don't worry. So first thing is, now in order to use, so as I've said, like entity framework is nothing but it has mapping code, right? It has, you normally write all the mapping code inside entity framework. You don't have to really go and do that map. You don't have to say like, how do we do in ADO.NET, right? Dataset.tables.0.field 0. No, you don't have to do all that. You just say that this field maps with this code once, and then you can start reusing that mapping again and again. Okay. So now let me do like this. So this is my UI. This is at this moment my console application. Let me create here some kind of, let's say, a customer DB context. If you see, this is very important change what is happening nowadays. If you see the era of 2006, 2007, people were saying data access layer. Nowadays, people are saying DB context. Why is it so? Anyone here? If you see nowadays, when you look at your LinkU, when it came in 2007-8, it said LinkU context. If you look at entity framework, it says entity framework context. Why doesn't it say data access layer anymore? Why is it so? What has changed in the terminology that nowadays all the ORMs, they use this word context. You can see this DB context is from entity framework core. So anyone here, this is very important part, guys. I know that a lot of people concentrate on the source code writing, and I will definitely do all that thing. But one of the most important thing is to understand, where these vocabularies come from. Why is it so much? Why is it so like this? So that we better understand, what kind of architecture patterns are getting implemented. What is the thought process? So here is some answer. So source can be, so it is not database specific. That is one. Source can be anything, both from SQL and non-SQL. Data might come from where. So I can see a lot of people have said, that data can come from any kind of data source. So wasn't that data access layer meant for that? If you look at the data access layer, what we used to discuss previously, so we say this data access layer can connect to Oracle or it can connect to SQL Server, right? So like, why isn't that word data access layer now changed to context? Let me see if I can fetch out some documents. I should actually take up one design pattern class. I think so. I should take up a design pattern class. So, right. So I can see lots of questions out there, answers out there, but those. So here a lot of people have answered saying the data access layer code does not work with multiple data sources. Okay, that's one part, multiple. But then why context? What is, when you see, look at the English meaning of context. English meaning of context says the context, in context of this, in context of this, right? So guys, this word has come from this domain-driven development. This word has been coined. It has been emerged from this domain-driven development. So let me talk about this. So the first thing, I will not go into domain-driven development at this moment, but I have come here specifically to clarify the word context, right? If you look, how many of you guys have done DDD? Not TDD, huh? Not test-driven development, domain-driven development. How many of you guys have done domain-driven development? Yeah. I'm sure you guys have done it, but it's just that. So if you have done domain-driven development, this word context is emerging, or it has been coined from that, you know. So I'll tell you what domain-driven development is. So in domain-driven development, it is something as follows. So okay, I can look at this book. This book is what is domain-driven development is all about. I can give this ebook to you guys. You can send a mail at Questpond. I will try to upload. It's a free ebook. I would still suggest to go and buy the book of Eric Evans, you know, who has designed domain-driven development. If you look at domain-driven development, it says that follow your domain. For example, if you're working in a travel domain, then if you see that there is a ticket, create a class ticket. Exactly, ticket, ticket. If you see that there is a itinerary, create a class itinerary in your code, right? If you see that there is itinerary and in your code you have created class path, very important, I'm saying here. Normally what happens is, like, let's say the end user who is from the domain, he says this is the itinerary, Bombay, London, Bombay. But then the developer must be an engineer, and he says, okay, this is also a path, isn't it? Now path and itinerary, they definitely are same, but then you have two different languages you are talking in, right? So this is called as the ubiquitous language. Okay, in ubiquitous language, we say that follow ubiquitous language means whatever is your end user saying. If your end user says check, then your class name is check. If your end user says bank, your class name is bank, right? So domain-driven development says that follow your domain, rule number one. Okay. Now, a lot of people must be thinking, oh, isn't this object-oriented programming, which says that my class names are nouns? Yes, it is. But if you look at an object-oriented programming, people used to name their classes like CLS ticket. No CLS, only ticket. Whatever the end user says, exactly try to follow that, right? So that's what domain-driven is. Now, in domain-driven development, the another rule which they follow is they follow inversion of control. In other words, they say that, okay, so let's say so you create your models, which can be a customer class, which can be your supplier class. So let me go and write some code here, you know, so that I can say, let's say I write a customer. So let's say this is a customer model. It has customer code, right? So there it is, customer code, right? And then it is, I'm so sorry guys, I today want to clarify that word context. And before that, I'm not going ahead. You all guys write dbcontext.add, and then nobody knows what that word context is. So I'm just going to emphasize today. I'm so sorry for this. I'm just showing. I can add more extra lectures of entity framework. Don't worry. You know. So let's say if we don't complete in this 2 weeks, I will add 1 more week to it. But let's try to clarify this. So this is customer here, right? Now, what they say that first follow the model, first follow your domain as it is. So this is good. Customer as it is, right? The second, they say that you should divide your project into 2 layers. One is an infrastructure layer and the other one is a domain layer. For example, now this is my domain, class customer. It will have validations. Customer code cannot be null. Customer code has to have this size and so on. So all that validations I should put in this thing. So all my business logic, my validation I should put here, right? Any technological layer. What do you mean by technological layer? Like for example, data access layer. The data access layer is a technological layer which connects to RDBMS. The technological layer, this domain the model should not depend on the technological layer. In other words, we should not see like this. For example, class, I'm using the word DAL for now, data access layer, right? We shouldn't see this like void add. Let's say this customer has an add. Data access layer X is equal to new data access layer. You can see here, in this case, the model is dependent on infrastructure layer. Remember, I'm making it very generic when I say infrastructure layer. Infrastructure means technological layer, like it can be a UI, it can be a data access layer, it can be a service like WCF, right? In this case, my model is dependent on data access layer. If tomorrow this data access layer changes to data access layer 1, I need to go and change my model also. You can see here, I'm just showing small things, right? So what they said, that this model, I should be able to initiate this model. I should be able to play around this model without any kind of technological layer like data access layer or UI layer. I can just go ahead, open up a console application, create your customer object, start putting data into it, make validations, check if it is working or not, right? So in other words, what people did is they said in domain-driven development, they said inversion of control, invert this work, remove it from here. That's what inversion of control is, right? It is a principle where we say unnecessary work of this, let's invert it and put it here. Now look at this. And yes, he adds the customer to the database. This it's a very small thinking. I understand from developer perspective, you must be thinking, hey, isn't this small? But it is very big impact, because now this guy has no reference of data access layer. The data access layer has reference of customer, and that is okay, because we all know that infrastructure layer keeps on changing. The UI goes from WPF to web forms or MVC, and the data access layer technology goes from entity or link queue to entity frame. Oh, okay. Can you hear me? So sorry. Yes. Okay. I'm so sorry, guys. I don't know what happened. It said audio disconnected and again connected. Can you guys please tell me where I actually, from which point I lost myself? I'm not sure. I'm so sorry for this. Can anyone tell me at which point? Inversion of control. Okay, about 2 minutes. So let me. Okay, inversion of control. That's the point I lost. Must be. So guys, here it is. I can just start 2 minutes back. So what I was saying is, okay, this is my customer. Okay, let me again start here. This is my customer and my model. This is my model at this moment, right? And this model, it has a method of add, and it is using this data access layer over here, right? It is using the data access layer, right? So the model is dependent on this code out here. We can say the model is dependent on infrastructure layer, right? What it means is that if there is some change in the infrastructure layer, for some reason this DAL 1 becomes DAL, I need to change here, right, in the model, right? And this is bad, right? So when you are dependent on someone, right, and if that person changes, definitely you are bound to shake, right? So that's what the inversion of control. Inversion of control says that everybody should be dependent on you and you should not be dependent on other people, right? So in other words, if we want that the model should not change, because model normally does not change. When I say don't change means the travel domain for past 100 years at least, they have this itinerary, they have travel, they have tickets, you know. So these things are so common. The bank has checks, the banks has deposits, all these things are there for past 50, 60 years and the vocabularies have not changed, right? So when the domain is not changing, right, what is changing is the technological era. Somebody says, okay, now it is ADO.NET, let us use LinkU, then you use Entity Framework, tomorrow you will use something else, and then the UI changes from the WinForm to WPF and from WPF to something else, right? So the technological the technological section, so in other words, what we mean here is our model, if we go this route where the model depends on data access layer, the model depends on UI, the model depends on this, we are gone, right? So what they say is inversion of control. They say that no, all the technological layers like data access layer will use the model. Let's say if you have a service layer, WCF maybe, he will use the model. But so all the technological layer will use the model, and when the technological layer changes, the model does not have to change. That is called as inversion of control, right? So over here now, rather than doing this, you can see the code now. We delete this code from here and we say to the data access layer, you call the customer, inversion of control. So in other words, here we say void add customer obj, and here you write whatever your data access layer code to add to the DB, right? Now this is so nice because now the customer has no reference of a data access layer. Do whatever you want to do with the data access layer. So definitely the client code changes because now the client code looks like this. So one is you will create the object, then you will create the object of data access layer, right? And then you will pass, so I'll just say public, you will pass the method to this like obj and say you will say save it, right? So you can see now your UI is having some extra lines of code, but the point is this model is not dependent on it. So that's why the code structure has changed, because a lot of people are now following domain driven development, right? Now coming to the word context, okay, is everyone clear on this first thing? Why? You look at the code structure, how it has changed. Previously the code structure was like this. It was obj dot, I don't know if you are coming from the old school of 1997, 2003, 2005, it was in this, there was a save method. I used to see a lot of times save like this. It was like this. Now, you know, this save from the domain has gone to the DAL. All your LinkU, your Dapper, your Entity Framework, everybody is nowadays, using this d.add, right? Okay, that's one part. Now coming to the word context. Let me know any questions around this. First thing, any queries? I'm so sorry I got disconnected in between. Is this code understood? Why this code structure is like this? Because this is the code structure for Entity Framework. Why is it like this? So I hope that everybody is now realizing it. Let me know any questions. Please type in there. Remember that at the end of the day, it's either it is Microsoft or it is either whoever are creating technological frameworks, right? They do follow the principles of DDD or the new emerging principles, right? And somewhere those principles map, and that's why the code structure becomes in that way. Okay, now coming to the word context. So what people say out here is, so we have this model. This model, when it goes into the infrastructure context, it can be anything. For example, I can take this model and I will say now the context is that he will use Entity Framework to save it to SQL Server. I will take this model and the context is that it will go to WCF. This is model, and the model context under which it will run is WPF must be, or it will run inside MVC. So what they say is that this model is a simple domain. But when it goes inside the computer, it has to run inside some context. That context can be, if you want to save, the context is entity framework. If you want to, what do you call, display on the UI, the context is MVC, right? So that's why now here, now this looks good, right? So we can say here, okay, this is DAL. Let's say this is entity framework, which will save to SQL Server. So we can say this is customer EF context, right? Now what it says is, or we can say EF context for just making more sense. So I'll say now, this is customer object into RAM, which is running. But now if I want to save into database, the context is that it will use entity framework and it will save it to DB, right? So but the context what comes into saying that this model will run inside what kind of infrastructure layer, right? Right, so that's what that word context is from. Any question, guys, on that word context? Any queries there? So the context just says that take this model and run inside the WCF context. Take this model, which is very decoupled. It is not dependent on the infrastructure layer. Run it inside the data access layer context, right? A lot of people who said that entity, the context words comes from that at the backend you can have SQL Server, Oracle. I think that is more a repository pattern. The repository pattern says at the backend you can have any kind of repositories, right? And you can go and you can save it. But when you talk about entity framework, sometimes it is, if you look at entity framework, the drivers only support Oracle, SQL Server, MySQL, some few one of them. Must be they don't support some of the other databases, right? So entity framework is a ORM. It is never meant to, yes, I understand that it does decouple it, but that context word is not for that. I understand what a lot of people were saying. Sir, context means it decouples. Yeah, but it is not exactly that thing. The context word has come from domain-driven development. Okay. Now, let's go ahead and let's start, writing some code. Okay. So first thing, let's say I have this model out here. This model is there here. So let's say I have this model, and this model I want to save it to a database, right? So this is the model out here, and I want to save it to database. Now there are two kind of developers in entity framework. One kind of developer, we can term it them as code first kind of developers, and the other kind of developers we can term them as database first developers, right? Now a lot of people mistake both of these vocabularies. Anyone here, what do you mean by a developer who is code first, and what do you mean by a developer who is database first? Anyone? What does it actually mean? Please note, don't tell me code first and developer database first from the perspective of the templates, please. A lot of people think that database first and code first is coming from the perspective of the templates. So when you say that I am following code first approach, and when you say I am following database first approach, what exactly does it mean? If anyone has answers, you can put down there. And mapping to an existing schema is database first. Very nice. Right. In code first, we create the model first. So nice. So here it is, guys. So Sumit is so right. And also, so I have this code. So first thing, there are people, who say that I have an existing database. Okay, so here it is. Let me just put down some perspective out here because it's a bit confusing. So in database first, it is not that I will create database first. No. It is not like that. I know that I can see some people here. Code first means my DB will be created by the model. In DB first, we first design the database, then we use it. So right. But I will put a perspective here. So as a lot of people have said, database first means you first create the DB, and then you have your model, and then map your model to it, right? So this is, a lot of people have written this, and I can see in code first, you say that your code or your model, I will say rather, model creates the DB. Okay. Now, what is the perspective out here, right? The perspective out here is that if you look at the first paragraph, right, the first sentence out there, right, what it says is that these developers are those developers who say that, ORM is only meant for mapping. It should not drive my database structure. It should not define that how my primary keys will be created. It should not define how should it be varchar or should it be nvarchar. That I will use my SQL Server Management Studio. I will use SQL Server to do it. So here, these people, these database first people are those people, where they want that model work should be separate. That model means the entity framework should only do mapping. Should only do mapping, right? And my database, I will use my SQL Server Management Studio and define my structure. My entity framework should not define my mapping. Okay. So remember, it is not about that I have created a database first. You can create the code first. You can write the model first. You can then go and right click and create the database also and then do the mapping. But the point here is that these kind of database, these kind of developers are traditional guys who think that, no, my database, if I want to change the structure of a database, I will write an alter query. I will go and fire some SQL. I will do it the DBA way. I can also say that these guys are those guys who say that SQL Server should be done with the SQL Server thought process and the model should be done with the object-oriented programming thought process. Okay, they don't want entity framework to drive. It is nvarchar or char or something, right? Now coming to code first. In code first, these developers think that from the code I will create my DB. So here in this, in the code, you will find things like, okay, my field name is what? My field name is FLD customer, right? And then it should be of type nvarchar. So you will find that people who are code first guys, from the database they dictate, from the code they dictate how the database is. While in the first, the thought process of that, those developers are no, like the database is separate and my entity framework code is separate, and entity framework should not have any code which says create a primary key, create a foreign key. No, it should not have anything one of those, right? So this is what the thought process is, right? So now what I will do here is, any questions guys on the thought process? So do not think about that first he will create the database and then he will create the model. Think about in terms of how the developer assigns the duty to it. The developer says, this is a DBA work. This SQL Server is a different piece altogether. It has its own management studio, let it, and he's expert in that. And this code is a different thing. I should put the models out here. I should not put any kind of DB code into this, right? And while in code first, the developer just writes everything inside the code. You run the code, the database is created, right? And if you want to change the database, it is again via the code. When DB is already existing and you want to control over the, okay, so yes, any questions guys? Let me look at the questions. I can take some questions. Code first means my DB will be created by the model. Absolutely right. But rather than thinking, my DB will be created by the model, I would say that those are those developers from the code, they are dictating how the DB structure will shape. Means I look from that perspective. So when DB is already existing, or you want to take control, I'm not sure, Praful, what's that? So in real life world scenario, DB first makes more sense. Okay, good thing, So anyone here who can say, where does code first make sense? I know that everybody into the first category. I know that even I'm from the first category. I don't want all that mess, because in the second category, I really don't know who are in the second category, and I would like to hear from you guys. I know that I know that why that second category is, but somewhere, because must be I'm coming from those 90 programming kind of era, where must be we have been taught that database should be handled separately and so on. So I don't prefer the second approach more. But with the new thought process, I've seen a lot of young developers. What they feel is that I can run the code and say that, okay, at the backend, the driver is MongoDB and it creates a MongoDB database structure. And then I say, oh, now I want to change my database to SQL Server must be. And because it is code first, I can go ahead and then change and create the database, which is for SQL Server. So I find that a lot of those devs, who feel that they don't want to get into at the backend what kind of RDBMS structure is, or what kind of database they are going to use tomorrow. That's where they use this. So that day I saw one of our developers. He created everything in entity framework. He used code first, and the same structure he created in MySQL, and the same structure then afterwards he changed the database and created in SQL Server. Okay. So that's the second kind of guy. But I'm from the first place, because why? Most of my projects have SQL Server because of whatever reason. And I don't feel that I will be into that era where I will change from SQL Server to Oracle. I don't think that happens in IT industry where suddenly you change from data Oracle to SQL Server. It is possible for small shops, the softwares who run on small shops, where they can say that, okay, he wants Oracle, so we'll give him Oracle. He wants SQL Server, we'll give him SQL Server. He does not have money, so we'll give him MySQL, must be, right? So must be those kind of situations are there. But in enterprise applications, once they take Oracle, it's only Oracle. Once they take it, SQL Server, only SQL Server. And second, in the first part, it is very easy to handle change management. So let us say I make 2-3 field changes, right? I will create a change request script. I will send it to the database guy. He will run that and he will change my database incrementally. And then my code gets checked in incrementally. So very easy to track what changes have been done. Okay. Does second model support multi-platform probability? As multi-platform, I'll say multi-database kind of scenario, where you say, now I'm using Oracle, so it creates Oracle structure must be. Now I'm creating MySQL, it uses the MySQL structure. Okay. If you don't have to create an RDBMS, if you don't have to work with RDBMS, then you don't have to use Entity Framework, Kalyan. I did not get that question. So Entity Framework, you need to have something at the back end. So with this, right, let us first try to see the scenario of code first. Let me try the code first scenario. Let's see how it looks like. So first thing is your Entity Framework will have at least 3 parts. So one is, this is the object out here, right? This is the O of that object, right? And the second one is it will have the mapping, right? So mapping, so what I'll do is I will say here, this is customer EF context. Okay. It inherits from DB context. Now remember that this DB context is the core class of Entity Framework, and you need to inherit from this class to do everything. So if you want to do mapping, if you want to fire a query, so everything is in this class. So I'm going to go and use the DB context class. This DB context class belongs to the Microsoft Entity Framework.core namespace. You can see out here. So I'm going to go and import this, right? Now, from this DB context class, we expose out something called as a DB set. Now, people who have already worked with Entity Framework 6 or Entity Framework 5, you can see the APIs have not changed. So I'm saying here that this, from this customer EF context, I'm expecting customer collection to be seen. So this DB set is nothing but like a data set which will expose out the customer table, right? Now, let's let me take this. Now the mapping thing, when I say mapping means what? Like, so this is customer, and it is possible that at the backend you want to create a TBL customer, right? So all the mapping code you write in your on model creating. So all your mapping code goes into this thing, overwrite on model creating. So in this, you go and you write all your mapping code out here. For example, I want to say that the class name is customer, but when it maps to the table, it will be TBL customer. So I have to say model builder dot. So what is the entity? You can see the code out here. Entity is customer, and it maps to dot to table TBL customer, right? Now, what is this model builder? This model builder is a Fluent API. What is a Fluent API? Anyone here? What do you mean by Fluent API? This model builder, if you go and search, you will find that a lot of people have said it's a Fluent API. Model builder, Fluent API. What is this word Fluent API? What does it exactly mean? Yes, anyone? Must be, okay, so in order to understand this word Fluent API, we should understand something called as Fluent interfaces. Anyone here Fluent interfaces? Fluent, I'm sorry guys, I don't have any kind of, I don't have any kind of PowerPoint presentation today, right? So I'm just Googling and showing you what it is. Fluent interfaces. You can see this word here, fluent interface by Martin Fowler. So Martin is a great author. He takes up any of the architectural concepts and makes it more easy to understand, right? So this Fluent API is used by, is nothing but it makes your API very easy to use. For example, think about, look at this code what Martin has given out here. You want to create an order. So you say order customer.add order. Then in that order, you add a line item. If you want to skip, you will set skippable. And then, so you can see it is so difficult to write this code. I have to create the order object, then I have to create the order line, and then I have to do this and this and this, right? Rather than doing this, if somebody gives you this, look at this API. Customer.new order .with .skippable .priority rush $.post .success .error. So if you have done jQuery or if you have done Angular, you know, like http this post subscribe you know. So Fluent API, and that's what the Fluent interface is, wherein, you know, you make your API like English, right? That's like speaking English. For example, look at your unit testing code, assert.requal, right? So this is called as a Fluent API, okay? So my question here is that if, let's say, you are given a class, how can you create a Fluent API? Let us say if somebody gives you such kind of a class, such kind of object, if somebody gives you, and if you want to create a wrapper on it, and if you want to make it Fluent API, what is the core thing you will use in C#? This is a question to everyone. I hope everybody is clear with Fluent API, guys. Look at it. I'm not sure if you can see that code. That code is more simpler as compared to the code at the top, right? So if you see, everyone is nowadays following Fluent API. Specifically, if you look at the JavaScript community, they're all following Fluent API. Angular, you know, jQuery, everyone is like Fluent API. My question here is, if you are given a .NET class which is object oriented, right, like order and line item, and yeah, very good, Vikas, thank you very much. I was expecting that. Extension methods. If somebody can go and Google that out, extension methods is the way, you know, where you can go ahead and you can create Fluent API. Very good, right? So this is a Fluent API. Now look at our code here. So model builder dot entity dot to table dot one to many dot many to one, whatever, right? So that's why it says model builder is a Fluent API. So the core mapping is done by this Fluent API dot property, right? Okay, so the model builder is a Fluent API, and that is used to do the mapping part for entity framework, right? So guys, any questions on the model builder part? Right now, more you know about the model builder, the more you become better in your entity framework code writing, right? So at this moment I showed you a simple mapping, but I will show you a big list out there where they have shown one to many, many to one, TPH, you know, so table per hierarchy, table per multiple hierarchy. So all that scenarios will cover. So more you know this API, the more better it is. Now also we need to go and connect to the database. So I'm going to go and let us see what happens with the code first. Remember, I'm trying to do code first at this moment. So over here, I will override one more method on configuring. This on configuring method is the method where I will try to call my SQL Server connection string. So you can see here I'm saying use SQL Server. So what I will do is let us go here to SQL Server and let us create a simple database here. New database, EF core. So now as it is code first, my expectation is that he will run and he will create a table inside it, and that table will be named TBL customer, and it will have customer code and customer name property. Code first, right? So now I need to only give is the connection string of this EF core. So what I'll do is, for getting the connection string, I can use the Server Explorer. So I'll just go and add a connection here. This is SQL Server. My server name is whatever. I will copy this. I will go here, and my database is EF core. I will select this and say okay, right? So now let me go to my Server Explorer here. Let me take this connection string from here. You can see this is how I just to get the connection string. I'm out here. Definitely this connection string you should put in a config file or something. At this moment, let's try to hard code it, and then we will see how to take it from an app config file or something. So, right, so that is my connection string. Okay, so now let us go ahead and let us try to see that if our entity framework code first works or not. So I'll try to insert an object. Customer ID is equal to 1, obj dot customer name is equal to Shiv, right? Obj dot customer code is equal to something, right? Now I need to create the object of my customer EF context. So customer EF context is equal to new customer EF context, right? And I will say to this context dot add. Remember, in entity framework, first you will add in memory and then you will do a physical commit. So you can see there are two methods given in entity framework when you are adding. So here I will say customer dot context dot add obj. So this code here just adds in memory. It does not do a physical commit. And then I will say context dot save changes. So you can see lots of this code is almost same as you have done in entity framework 6, right? So there it is. You can see. So this is in memory, and this one here is physical commit to the database. So this will actually do a physical commit, right? Okay, so let us try to run this code and let us see that code first. Does it go and create the database structure by itself, right? Okay, so I'll run this. Remember, I'm using console application for now, but slowly we will see that. Okay, so there it is. So I've initialized my object. I've initialized my context. So all that connection string has been working. Added this object to the in memory, and I'm not trying to make a final save changes. And I have some errors here. We'll see that. So when you see such errors, first thing, go to view details and let us very quickly look into it. So I'm going to scroll here. Okay. Right, so just copy the details. Okay, let's read it. You can see now, by default, he's saying that invalid object name TBL customer. So in other words, he's expecting you to create an TBL customer object. This is so nice actually, because he's expecting that you follow first the DB first. You can see now he's giving me here saying that, okay, first create the TBL customer. So let us do like this, guys. You know, let me go ahead and create a TBL customer first, you know. So then I will, so let us do like this. Let us first do DB first, because already I'm in here now. So you can see now the error here says that I expecting a TBL customer. So let me first show database first, and then I'll go for code first, okay? Because I thought by default he will follow it, but he did not. So customer ID. At this moment, I'm keeping the same property names, the same field names, right? We'll see later on how we can go and map field names which are different. Customer code, customer name, right? Customer ID, customer name, customer code, right? I'll set as the primary key, Control S, TBL customer, right? Let's see now. Okay, so there it is. You can see now. So that means by default, what this EF code is doing is it is actually following database first, and that is right? Because that's how standardly all people are doing things. So you can see I've said save changes, and I should see this value getting inserted into my table. So you can see the value has got inserted, right? Okay. So guys, we'll do the code first later on, right? Because what is happening is I'm doing work on EF6 at this moment heavily, and in my mind it was that code, and there if you see code first works first. If you go and see EF6, in EF6 when you run the code, it goes ahead and creates a table, even if you, so I just got lost, so basically in EF core it does not. In EF core it has gone the other way around. It has said that you need to have database, right? If you want to go ahead and make it code first, there is another way to enable it. We'll see that. So any question, guys, at least on the basic part of it. So what we did is 2-3 things. We use this on configuring event and we specified the connection string out here. We use the on model creating and we did the mapping of the customer class with the table name, right? And then we call the add and the save changes, right? So any queries at least on the basic part of the code? If you have any questions, you can go and type down below. Now I'm open to questions because we have completed almost 1 hour. So rather than me speaking, I would like to get some questions from everyone. Okay, there is a nice question out here. Okay, I'll answer that. So in configuring, will it be different or will it be same? So yes, so okay, good question. The Vikas question here is that in configuring we have SQL or Oracle, will it be different? Well, you need to install the driver. Remember, this one, use SQL Server, is using the Microsoft Core SQL Server. So if you see at this moment, we installed 2 nuggets. One nugget was the Entity Framework Core and the other nugget was Entity Framework Core SQL Server. So at this moment, this one will not connect to Oracle. For Oracle, we need to install the appropriate EF Core Oracle, whatever it can be. So only by changing the connection string, it will not work over here. So if you see here in this manage nugget packages, we have 2 nuggets which we have installed at this moment for this project. Can you see one is Entity Framework Core and one is Entity Framework Core for SQL Server. So in the same way, you need to go and search for Oracle what we have. This method name also says use SQL Server. There is no use Oracle in that, at least to my knowledge. Okay, so here is a question. So yeah, any questions, guys? Any other questions? Yes. Okay, there is a very good question which has come out here, and I would like to answer this. There are 2 questions which are here. One is ADO.NET versus Entity Framework. What is the performance-wise? Good question. And there is one more question which is very much related to this. Should I use Entity? Should I follow the CQRS method for EF? Very nice. Both of these questions I would like to put ahead in the notepad here. What is the performance of ADO.NET versus Entity Framework? Good question. Second one is like, does it follow CQRS? Should we follow CQRS fundamental for it, right? Let me first talk about CQRS because the first question is answered if you know CQRS properly, right? And the CQRS again comes from the funda of domain-driven development. The CQRS, okay, anyone here who is aware of CQRS? Very nice. All of these things are connected, huh, guys? Everything is connected out here. Is anyone aware of CQRS? So Naresh, I'll come to your question as well. I'm just trying to first get these 2 questions out. Anyone here who's aware of CQRS? CQRS. Okay. So one is CQRS. Another one, where is my book? Domain-driven development. Guys, I would suggest to please go ahead and look into domain-driven development. There is this word called as bounded context. You can see there's a small word in this. This book is a 91-page book. 100 page must be maximum. Go ahead, take a printout of this book. This book is like theory. You can see it's all theory out here. Lie on your bed, read this book. I'm sure that your mind will change the way you look at your code, right? But let me talk about this. This bounded context is connected to CQRS, and CQRS will answer that question of ADO.NET versus Entity Framework versus stored procedure. Should I use stored procedure or not? And so on, right? What is bounded context? Bounded context means sometimes, 2 contexts looks very same, but they are not same. Means what? For example, let's say you take a class, assume, you take a class and let's say you create this model called as class customer, right? Assume, which I've done for now. You write a property here called a string customer code. Okay. And then you use this class for inserting, for updating, for deleting. Let's say it also has a method called as validate that goes and validates the business logic for the customer, right? All this is good. Okay. Now suddenly somebody says, hey, like we want to use this, we want to go and display reports. We want to go and display a report where we have customer data. Now, what do you think? First, as a developer, you think reusability. We will not write duplicate code. So you say, okay, in this class, can't we use the same class to do it, right? So what do? You start using the same class, right? Now, eventually what happens is this class actually goes through a lot of validation process. So you say that when I'm loading from the database, why should I validate my data again and again? So what do? You go ahead and you create something, a Boolean flag saying, let's say bypass, right? And you say, okay, when I'm loading data from the database, this whole validate, this bypass will be true. So when this bypass is true, do not check the validation. And I'm not sure how many of you guys have done that. I've done it as a junior developer when I was coding in Visual Basic 6 and VC++. I remember that I was so infatuated with this so-called as reusability that one class, okay, hang on, just 2 minutes, guys. That one class, which which is there, right? Okay, hang on. Oh gosh, let me just exit from this. So now that one class, what has happened with that one class? Because you said reusability, right, out there. What has happened out there is your class, which was supposed to be a model, has suddenly become into something weird, right? So rather than this, if you had done like this, you would have said, okay, this is a customer class only for validation purpose. This is only for validation purpose. And I will create one more class, customer DTO, data transfer object. In this, I will just have set and get, nothing else. No validations and nothing else. So like string customer code, string customer name. I'm sure that a lot of you people must be creating two different classes, one for insert, update, and delete, and the other one for reading. So a lot of people also call this kind of classes as reporting classes. I've seen such kind of projects, separate source projects, where that class is just empty with nothing, right? Bounded context. This class is bounded with validations. This class is meant to do validations. So whenever data goes from insert, updates, and deletes. This down below, this class is meant for reading purpose, CQRS. So command query responsibility principle. The name is only big. All the commands, the responsibility command means insert, update, and delete. Insert, update, and delete. You write a separate class for it. And query for reading, CQRS, query, you create a separate class. So command query responsibility principle says create two different classes. And this follows the domain driven principle. So if you go and see out there, maybe I can show you some diagram of CQRS, a lot of architecture diagrams out there. You can see this diagram. This diagram is so awesome. It says that, so this is the UI part, this is the database part, right? For the query model, it should be flat. We don't want like customer inside, address inside, phone. We say one big class, customer, address one. We are okay with duplicate values. Denormalized class. I don't know how do I name that class, right? Command one, no, the data is going into database. Full validation should happen. Everything should happen. We cannot send bad data inside the database, right? All the validation should pass. So command query responsibility principle says that you should have different kind of classes which does different kind of work, right? So first answering that question, what is CQRS, which was asked. So where is my notepad, right? So that is CQRS. Now in entity framework, should you follow CQRS? Absolutely, you should follow CQRS. In entity framework, when you are adding, updating, deleting the data, no problem. One record, you are adding how much? 100 records? Fine. See, when you are adding records, when you're updating records, when you're deleting record, there is no query plan created. There is no query plan in SQL Server for insert, update, and delete. There is a query plan for select. Now the model, the object model of ORM, of entity framework, is very tight. So for example, over here now, I would do something like this, because I need to map to my RDBMS, right? So this is class customer, this is class address, and this is list of addresses. Can you see this? Now think about it. If I have to load 1 million record, what, like I will load customer inside that, this 1 million into 1 million, this does not make sense, right? So this model is very good for inserting. So please use entity framework when you're doing insert, update, and delete, no problem. You don't want to use stored procedures, still no problem. If you're not writing sp underscore insert, if you're not writing sp underscore delete, no issues. But if you're writing sp underscore, if you're saying select, then that has to go through a class, right? That has to go through a different class. So when you're querying from entity framework, please don't use entity framework. Then you will find, yes, entity framework are great. When you're querying entity framework, create a separate class and make entity framework for that class. Means create a DTO class, customer, with only set and get property, no validations. Look at this, customer, this is customer DTO. In this also I will write, I will say this is address 1. You can see now I did not create a list of address. And then this you use for EF mapping. So if you are using entity framework, I would expect to see two different kind of classes. One is the insert, update, delete kind of classes, and one is the classes which are having DTO, right? Or else your entity framework is not working properly. You are going to have a lot of issues of performance. You will say that you are trying to fill a deep structure out here. It is loading one record inside another record, right? So guys, any questions on this one? I hope this is understood. This is very important. So coming now to that part, ADO.NET versus EF, right? So first thing, entity framework is a wrapper on ADO.NET. So definitely the performance is going to be problematic. But here is the thing. If you go and follow the DTO approach, the CQRS approach, you won't find too much difference. You won't find too much difference out there, right? So don't worry about performance if you're following the CQRS approach. What is the correct way to generalize ORM? The correct way to generalize ORM, so is by using repository pattern. So when I say generalize, means what you're saying, Naresh, here is that basically you have a repository, right? At the front end you have a repository, and at the back end you can have Dapper ORM, or you can have an entity framework ORM, and so on. You need to have a repository pattern. Repository pattern is a good way of encapsulating everything at the back end. So a lot of people say that, should I use repository pattern in entity framework? Yes, you should, because tomorrow what if you want to change from entity framework to some super entity framework, right? So good question. Some say Dapper is faster than EF. Possible, yes, it can be possible. I'm not sure. I need to look into it. But here it is. My problem with Dapper is that, or I'll say psychologically, I'm sure that many of the other developers would be, that when something comes from the horse mouth, like Microsoft, when SQL Server is his, ADO.NET is his, and when entity framework is his, right? So I would better trust that. But said and done, we need to look into how Dapper looks like. But I've heard from many of the sources that Dapper is super fast. So, and we need to look into it. I'm not really sure. We should do some load test and check it out. Okay. So guys, great. So today, guys, we'll do like this. So I know that today we have just done a warm-up session, and I'm going to extend these training sessions of entity framework more. Today, let's try to close this class over here at this moment, because the internet is getting disconnected again and again. And I feel that I'm going to have issues after 10-15 minutes. I've got a message. We'll continue this entity framework session again in the next class. In the next class, I will be talking about one-to-many mapping, many-to-one mapping, one-to-one mapping, and also I will talk about repository pattern, right? So also I will discuss about how we can use repository pattern with entity framework. Yes, I can share the book. Yes, I can share the book. So how can I share the book? Okay, over here, I think I don't know how I can share. So guys, do like this now, guys. Can you send us a mail at questmod@questmod.com? I will try to get this book to you. I should have uploaded it as a training material, but actually I was not sure that I will talk about domain-driven development today. So, but fine, just send a mail, and Khadak, I will give you the book and you can pass it to everyone else. Will we have the recorded session? Yes, absolutely, we'll have the recorded sessions. All these are recorded. Second, Entity Framework, we are recording it fresh because those are all old videos, we understand it. Also, I would like to update you guys. Today, we are uploading Visual Studio integration with Angular. So today, tomorrow, you will see that video coming out. Lots of videos. We are revamping our videos of design pattern. They are really, really very old. We have recently revamped our factory pattern and abstract factory pattern with a new thought process, right? Yes, so the direct download, yes. So if actually I downloaded this book from InfoQ. If you go to InfoQ, okay, first thing, the paid book is different. I guess paid book is different. This InfoQ book, what you have out here, it gives the summary of Eric Evans. So Eric Evans' book is different. I would suggest for Eric Evans, please go and buy the book from the printed book. But if you go to InfoQ.com, you can try to get this domain-driven development design quickly book, right? So this is the thing. This book is written by two other authors. Actually, there are two other authors out here. What is it? Two other authors. So Abel and Avram Floyd, you know, so those are two other authors. So they actually they wrote the book, right? Yeah, Srikant, can you mail what things you're looking at? You know, we can have a look, right? So thank you, everyone. Thank you. And next week, repository pattern, we'll see how to do updates. I'm sure you guys know update and delete and everything in Entity Framework. So I'll be covering some higher end topics. I will look from the architecture perspective of Entity Framework. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thanks a lot. Have a nice day. Thank you.